Money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about. The defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, used money, power, and sex, or the promise of those things, to get what she wanted. What she wanted was money, power, and sex. It didn't matter what obstacles she had to remove to get what she wanted. It didn't matter if the obstacle was a thing or a person. And if it was a person, it didn't matter who. Tylee Ryan was a vibrant young woman, 17 years old, a whole life ahead of her. She was just about to enter into adulthood and make her own way in the world. Who knows what she would have become. Tylee had already lost her father, and she received Social Security benefits because of that. Tylee had money. Lori wanted it. Tylee's gone. Joshua Jackson Vallow, lovingly known by friends and family as JJ, was a 7-year-old, vibrant, happy-go-lucky little boy. He had most of his childhood and his whole life ahead of him. But JJ was tough. He's a 7-year-old. He took a lot of time and effort and energy to care for. That time, effort, and energy took away from the defendant doing what she wanted to do, and from the defendant being with Chad Daybell and devoting her time and attention to him. JJ had also lost his father. And when JJ lost his father, he became even that much more difficult to care for. No longer a second parent to help. Not only that, JJ also was entitled to Social Security benefits. The defendant didn't want to have to take care of JJ anymore. She wanted the money. JJ's gone. Tamara Douglas Daybell, known by friends and family as Tammy, a 49-year-old mother of 5, a grandmother, a computer whiz by all accounts. She was married to Chad Daybell. The defendant wanted Chad all to herself. Chad was the beneficiary of a life insurance policy for Tammy. Lori wanted those things. Tammy's gone. Tylee was last seen on September 8th of 2019. She had just relocated with her mother to Rexburg, Idaho on or about September 1st of 2019. And 7 days later is the last known sighting of Tylee. The next time Tylee is seen is on June 9th of 2020. She's found buried in a shallow grave on Chad Daybell's property. And when I say she's found, what I mean is what was left of Tylee was found. Charred remains. That's what was left of Tylee. You will hear it described as a mass of bone and tissue. That's what was left of this beautiful young woman, the defendant's daughter. You will also hear how Tylee's DNA was recovered on a pickaxe and shovel located in a shed on defendant Daybell's property. JJ was last seen on September 22nd of 2019 at the defendant's apartment in Rexburg, Idaho. Last time JJ was seen, he was with his uncle, Alex Cox, the defendant's brother. You'll hear from a witness that he saw Alex Cox carrying JJ. JJ's head on his shoulder. Appeared to be a peaceful scene. Appeared JJ was sleeping at that time. JJ was not seen again until June 9th of 2020, when he was also found in a shallow grave on the defendant's property. JJ was found wrapped in garbage bags with duct tape around him. He had duct tape around his head. He had duct tape around his arms, taping them into a position like this. That's how the defendant's little boy was found. You will hear what a difficult scene that was to process. Law enforcement had been searching for these children since November of 2019, And even the most veteran law enforcement officers you'll hear from were disturbed by the scene. Some may have still been holding out hope against all odds that we'd find these children alive, but this wasn't what they expected to find. Tammy was last seen alive on the night of October 18th of 2019. Her son left to work. She was home alone with Chad Daybell on that night. On the morning of October 19th, just before 6 a.m., a 911 call is placed. Tammy's dead. She's cold and she's stiff. What we know is by the time law enforcement showed up, Chad Daybell had moved her body. Chad Daybell gives a description that Tammy wasn't feeling well, she'd been sick. Very few other witnesses report any concerns about Tammy's health. And mind you, at the time law enforcement show up at Tammy's death, when it's been reported, it's unknown at that time about JJ and Tylee missing. It's unknown that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell are in any kind of a relationship. So nothing about Tammy's death is initially deemed to be suspicious. You will hear that the defendant was in Hawaii at the time Tammy died. And you will also hear that less than 3 weeks later, 17 days to be exact, the defendant and Chad Daybell were back in Hawaii. They were getting married on a sunny beach in Hawaii, dancing and celebrating their life together, while Tylee and JJ were cold in the ground in shallow graves, and while Tammy had just barely been laid to rest in the Springville, Utah cemetery, her hometown. The missing children, the sudden death of Tammy, the quick marriage of Chad and the defendant left so many questions for those still grieving the loss of Tammy and those still wondering 24/7 about the whereabouts and safety of the children. You will also hear how the defendant had switched Tylee's money from Tylee's JP Morgan Chase account to go into the defendant's BBVA account on or about August 16th of 2019. Tylee went missing on September 8th of 2019. You will also hear how she had begun receiving benefits on JJ's behalf approximately a month before he was last seen. And you will hear how she continued to collect those benefits and that money to fund her lifestyle. You are going to hear a lot of different dates and events that occurred on those dates, phone calls that were placed on those dates, messages that were sent, financial transactions that occurred. The reason you're going to hear about so many dates and so many events is because I've talked about dates in 2019 and 2020. This case actually starts in October of 2018. In October of 2018, the defendant met Chad Daybell for the first time. You'll hear that she had read his books. She was a fan of his. But she traveled to a Preparing the People conference in St. George, Utah. She traveled there with her friends, Melanie Gibb and Sulema Pastenis. These are two women that you will hear more about, and you will hear from them during this trial. When she traveled there with them, she met Chad for the first time. You'll hear it described that there appeared to be some kind of an instant connection. The two of them talked a lot. The defendant was flirty. But what you will also hear is that during this first meeting, the defendant and Chad decide that they share purported religious beliefs, and that they share beliefs that the two of them had been married before in a prior probation. You will hear it talked about multi-creations or a prior probation or a prior life. But regardless of the term used, what they began to tell others is that they were essentially meant to be together. They'd been married in prior lives, prior probations. Not only that, but they both said that they had been prior figures from or persons from the Bible or other religious references. This will include that they designated themselves as James and Elena. And you will hear that they pursued this line of thought and they pursued these teachings to others to the extent that Chad Daybell wrote a story, the James and Elena story for Lori, for the defendant. And you will hear through testimony how that story mirrored some true life events that were going on between the defendant and Chad Daybell. And at the time they met, it's important to remember they were both married to other people. Their spouses were both alive and well when they first met. But again, remember, the defendant will remove any obstacle in her way to get what she wants. And she wanted Chad Daybell. She had decided that. Soon after that first meeting in October of 2018, you will hear how the defendants began communicating regularly. Their relationship moved quickly. You will hear how Chad traveled to Arizona that next month in November of 2018. He traveled for a conference, but the defendant also held a gathering at her house, and Chad Daybell was present. You will hear how shortly after, the defendant, with the help of Chad Daybell, began telling people and reporting religious beliefs and teaching people about a rating system of light and dark. The defendant told others that with the help of Chad, she could rate people as light or dark. And pretty soon this theory evolved and these teachings evolved. And they started to say, well, if somebody's dark, an evil spirit or an evil entity can come in and they can push the real person out and take over the body. And the defendant and Chad Daybell talked about how you would get rid of these evil spirits. So the first thing they did was the defendant would lead castings. And you'll hear the castings described a little different by different witnesses, but with the idea being that there was prayer and energy work. They wouldn't have to be near the person that they were casting on, but they would get together and pray or do energy work to get rid of this evil spirit. You will also hear that these castings, time and time again, didn't work. But you'll hear that these teachings evolved. And they evolved to, well, a person could be so dark or a spirit could be so evil that the person actually becomes a zombie. You can't cast a zombie out. But a common theme was the body had to be destroyed. The defendant and Chad used their self-proclaimed religious beliefs and teachings to justify their actions to others. Their actions from an affair to murder. This was especially true with regards to the defendant's brother, Alex Cox. You will hear how Alex and the defendant had an extremely close relationship. Alex would do anything for Lori. And you'll hear how when Alex would do anything for Lori, when she uprooted her life in Arizona on or about September 1st of 2019 and moved up to Idaho and moved to Rexburg to be closer to Chad, that Alex quit his job and moved up to Rexburg with her. If Chad and Lori ask it, Alex did it. You will also hear how Alex Cox was taught by both the defendant and Chad Daybell that his purpose in this probation or this life or this creation, whichever term they use, was to protect Lori. He was a warrior and he was here to protect Lori. When the defendant would talk about people being light and dark, she talked about her own daughter, Tylee, being dark. She told people this, and there's messages that she sent regarding this. But what you won't hear is anything about the defendant doing anything when Tylee went missing. There were no known actions taken by the defendant. No report to law enforcement. No missing person posters. No inquiries. Similarly with JJ, little 7-year-old boy. The defendant said he was dark. He was possessed. She told people this. There's messages about it. But again, what you won't hear is that when JJ went missing, that the defendant did anything. There are no known actions by the defendant to find JJ. No report to law enforcement. No missing person posters. No inquiries. You will hear how she described JJ's behaviors to others in an attempt to get them to agree that he must not be JJ anymore, that an evil spirit must have taken over his body. And you will hear how she was very convincing. You'll hear from witnesses how they believed what Lori told them. She was likable, energetic, and they believed her. They wanted to believe her. They wanted to follow Lori. They wanted what she was saying to be true. You will also hear how she told a friend of hers named April Raymond, who's another woman that you will hear from, that when she got divorced, that JJ would need to go live with Charles, his father, and that Charles would have to figure out what to do with him. And part of why she talked about this was that the defendant was also telling people that she was here on a mission. She was here on a religious mission to gather the 144,000. So she needed to spend her time and energy there. So JJ could go live with Charles because she had other things to do. She had more important things to do than care for her child. She expressed to people that what she did here on earth no longer counted for her. You'll hear how she'd hit her hand. Doesn't count for me. Doesn't count for me. She explained this to others by telling them that she was a translated being, and you'll hear more about that and what they taught with regards to that. But she convinced others that they were also in the translation process. Again, she's very convincing. People wanted to believe her. People trusted her.